Hot off an unbelievable wildcard round. Let's run through all of it. We're going to have Willie Colon join us here shortly. A couple different things to get to. All right, let's start with Daniel Jones. He ends an 11-year playoff drought for the New York Giants. This is a quarterback who, before the season started, his fifth-year option was declined. That doesn't happen a lot. 379 total yards. He was everything in this game. You know, when you're sitting at home and you're watching and you're going, can the Giants just run all over him today? I guess they can do that. And it looks like Daniel Jones, not only his rushing attack in the first half, but he threw for over 300. That's something he doesn't do very often. But we pointed out at the end of last week that he has done it a couple times. His second highest passing total was against the Vikings in the regular season. They ran it for 142, 4.7 yards per carry. And it was weird. It was weird because, you know, we watch these games, especially the ones we're really focused on, playoff games, like, okay, what are they going to try to do? What are they going to try to take away? What's their goal? What's the thing that they're trying to rely on? And with the Giants against this Vikings defense that we said was the worst of any of the teams in the playoffs, like, it feels like they can kind of do anything. This happened twice during the weekend where the team that has doubts about them was kind of sold to us during the broadcast. It happens a lot. It's not that big of a deal. It happened with the Miami-Buffalo game, which we'll touch on briefly here. But at some point in that, once it was competitive, you're like, you know, we were talking to Mike McDaniel, and he was like, why is no one giving us a chance? We already beat him once in the regular season. Yeah, that was with the quarterback that was 2 steps ahead on the depth chart of the guy that's playing right now at Buffalo. So yes, it's a little different, Mike. This also happened in the Vikings game where they showed, hey, look at the 11-0 record, NFL record for a team to be 11-0 in the one-score games. This is incredible. And then they started showing some of the other numbers, and it's like, yeah, they have sort of conditioned themselves to win these games, except that didn't happen this weekend. Cousins threw it all day. And I know that some of you are already predicting that I was going to do some big Cousins victory lap. I'm not. He wasn't the problem. It's this defense. It's why we doubted him. It's why we kept looking at the point differential. It's why we were like, all right, it's a really good record, but I mean, how do you feel at the end of a Vikings game? And I don't know that any of us are all that surprised, but as bad as that throw was at the end of the game, 4th and 8 to Hawkinson, TJ Hawkinson had been terrific. He was one-on-one on the right side. It's 4th and 8. And Cousins throws it 3 yards past the line of scrimmage. Hawkinson's going to make a one-on-one play with 5 yards to go. It was a really tough spot considering the way the ball was thrown, where he was going to catch it, where he was going to be on the field, and the angle the defender had. It was a lot to ask, especially on 4th and 8, to not get it past the sticks. And yes, in the past, that has been one of my biggest concerns with Cousins. It's why I think teams have been like, I'm not sure. But I don't really feel like on a Monday morning it's some big victory lap if you're anti-Cousins, because he's not the problem. He was tough all season long. I think statistically he was better in some categories. There's some overall numbers that tell you that's actually the worst year he's had in 4 years. But my biggest thing is giving your team a chance to convert on that first down. And on 4th down in that spot, that's not what you want. But again, that's not really what it was. It was Daniel Jones. And I can't imagine what what his journey's been like where the agent goes, yeah, they declined your option. Like, okay. All right, we got a new coaching staff in here. We'll see what happens. And by the way, just some of the defensive skill individually on this Giants team, specifically Dexter Lawrence, who I can't wait to talk to Willie about. That guy is an absolute game wrecker. The Clemson first-round pick who went 17th a few years ago. All right, so congrats to the Giants. Classic football scores all across the entire weekend. And what I mean by that is, as much as we all love this game, I will admit sometimes I'm like, is this sport just stupid? And really, we had multiple examples of this throughout. And this is based on, too, your preconceived notions on what's going to happen, who you think is going to be better, who you picked, you know, the confirmation bias as you're watching anything in sports. I like this guy. Hey, he's really good. You know what I mean? Like, we all do it all the time. But Niners, Seattle, I didn't think there was a chance in hell of all the double-digit spreads. This was the one where I was like, yeah, I think you're okay on this one. There was nothing that told you Seattle was going to be able to match up well here. I thought Geno was regressing a bit despite him individually being an incredible story. And honestly, the Seahawks, great. Like, if you're a Seahawks fan today, you're bummed out that you're out of the playoffs. But this was a season you did not expect. And as a fan, especially as a fan who has a championship in their back pocket, recent memory, these are some of the great seasons where you're like, oh my, like, I can't believe, I thought we were going to be tanking the entire time. So the Niners come out. They're up 10-0 after the first 2 possessions. We'll get to Purdy more on him in a little bit here when I talk about coaching. And then Seattle's up 17-16 at the half. You're like, what? Like, wait, how did this happen? It's football. Buffalo's up 17-0. Their possessions to start the game, fourth down, they don't convert, touchdown, field goal. And then it's 20-17 at the half against Skylar Thompson. And you're thinking, wait, this is going to happen? I'm getting texts from Bills fans going, this is the worst. We're the worst. And more on that a little bit later as well. And then you have Cincinnati with Baltimore. Cincinnati gets a field goal. Huntley looks absolutely terrible to start that game for Baltimore. They get the interception. Cincinnati touchdown. They miss the extra point. It's 9-0. And then it's 10-9 Baltimore at half. That's why we keep watching. That's why the coaches yell at everybody all the time. That's why they keep preaching constantly. We have a chance because everybody kind of does, even when it feels like you don't. The Cincinnati game may have been, I don't know, that Skylar Thompson one is probably the most surprising, but Cincinnati's right up there with the fact that you look at the first half stats, you go, both teams only had 3 possessions. There were 6 total possessions combined in that first half. Both teams ran only 30 plays. So if you're Baltimore's defense, you're thinking we held Cincinnati's offense to 17 points. We did our job because it looked like Chase was going to go off because Burrow was finding him the entire time. But then Burrow starts getting hit a little bit more, sacked 4 times in this game. The offensive line part for Cincinnati is going to be a huge part of it. They're probably the happiest people ever that Von Miller is not around, even though I miss Von Miller and love watching him play, not rooting for anybody's injury. But that would seem to change that matchup as we go into next week. But really, this comes down to a 98-yard fumble recovery by Sam Hubbard. So on this play for Huntley, third down, now he's at the 2. QB sneak and reach at the 1 seems far more doable. I don't like the way players reach, but it's a really hard thing to tell them not to do. Sometimes it can feel a little selfish, but man, if you're a skill guy and you're running to the pylon and you know you're not going to make the angle and you want a fucking touchdown, you're going to reach. You know, like if we ever heard of the guy getting credit, be like, hey, that was great. He went right out of bounds, didn't reach for the pylon, therefore never chanced or risked fumbling the football in a big spot. So I saw obviously reaction of like not reaching when it's third down because it's not necessarily do or die in that spot, but it's hard to tell a football player, don't try to do everything you can. Like, do we ever see the guy convert it? It's like, oh man, he shouldn't have done that. Because we see plenty of guys go up the pile and then they reach over. But from the 2, even though it was a really tight formation under center, all sorts of blocking and push help, you know, Huntley's a smaller guy and the fumble pops out. And Mike Tirico was so good on this call. I'm just assigning a little credit here because I would admit, like you, there are so many times I'm watching the game and play-by-play is a little weird. It can be a little hard. You're trying to pay attention to different things, but it can feel at times the play-by-play announcer is late on the thing that actually happened. I mean, how many times in a game where you're going like, no, the ball's already out. Like, how did you not see that? No, that's not what happened. And then it's on the third replay and you feel like the commentator's finally caught up with you at home on the couch. That should not be the way the deal goes. On this, Tirico was on it immediately. Like he was in the play, like on the field. It was perfect. And then Hubbard's running away. You think, is there any chance he's going to get there? For any of you suggesting that was a block in the back on that, that's total bullshit. I saw a couple screen grabs on it. It wasn't a block in the back. It was like incidental contact where a player's hand was sort of on, was it Andrews who was chasing him? And then Andrews sort of dove forward. If they had called that a block in the back, that would have been a huge mistake. So I didn't think that was the problem at all. Anyway, Cincinnati moves on, and they have Buffalo next Sunday. Let's stay with coaching because I think it's an overall theme of what we saw this weekend, and let's be positive here. We've gone over Shanahan's resume, who is now 49-26, including the regular season and the playoffs, with Brock Purdy, Garoppolo, Lance, Nick Mullins, and C.J. Beathard. Now, you know, again, the Trey Lance numbers limited because of the injury this year. This is what I loved about what I saw, not only from Shanahan and the Niners, but I see more and more, and I think this is the way football should always be played. Brock Purdy wasn't great in the first half. The overall numbers are incredible. 18 to 33, 32, 3 touchdowns, stays clean on the turnover number there for the interceptions. But with 108 left in the first half, and you know, there were some numbers that would tell you Purdy was, I didn't think he was great in the first half. All right, that's fine. But Shanahan's going, all right, 108 left. We've got a possession. It's football. We're not, like, we can't give these away. We don't get many of them. Look at Cincinnati. They had 3 in the first half. So let's see if we can't sneak out some points out of this deal. They threw it 7 times, went 49 yards, kicked a field goal. I don't know Well, I know for a fact growing up, coaches wouldn't have done that. There's a Jim Tressel joke in here somewhere, but Tressel's teams are always way better than everybody else. Bill Cowher, would he have done that kind of stuff? Again, that's kind of the way football was played. Brock Purdy in this spot at home. Hey, it's fine. I mean, look, hell, we even saw it with Stetson Bennett at Georgia against Ohio State in the first half where he threw like a weird second down pass, and then Kirby and those guys are like, all right, let's knee it, get the hell out of here. Like, we're not doing that. Shanahan in the spot's going, hey, we have a chance. There's still a minute plus left. I know it's still Brock Purdy, but Purdy's done some big things in the regular season for him. I love the confidence in the player from the coaching staff. Let's look at the Giants and Daniel Jones. Jones, as we mentioned, looked like he was going to be a backup, maybe even out of the league. You're picked that high. The options decline. The people in-house are making that decision on you, although it's a little different because Joe Judge was there before Dable. But Dable comes in, and he looks like a completely different guy. Completely different guy. And then on the other side, if you're the Pats, you're like, we want to be in business with the guy that coached him before. Mike McDaniel. Speaking of people looking entirely different, Tua. Yes, some of the blitz stuff that I saw Booger McFarland pointing out on social media, which I thought was really accurate. Like if you're going zero coverage, sending everybody and not giving everybody back, and then it worked, you can't just do it again. You can't do it like back-to-back plays. And I don't know specifically if it was back-to-back plays, but suggesting mix it up a little bit here. But this isn't necessarily just about this play call working or this play call not working. It's about the faith and the confidence, and it's deciding to push it. Because Skylar Thompson, if you watched him against the Jets and Pats to close the regular seasons, and he still, despite 45 pass attempts, ended up right around that 5 yards per attempt, which isn't a great number. But it was pretty clear that McDaniel's like, we're not going to just hand it off. But, we're not going to go power I here all day. Like, we have to figure out a way to keep up with the Bills and score some points, because we also saw this weekend that the quarterbacks, those elite guys, are really the game changers. The Bills can turn it over 3 times, screw up, have Skylar Thompson move the football against them. Again, the overall offensive numbers weren't amazing for the Dolphins. They just were finding ways to score points. But then Allen could come in and fix it all for you, right? Trevor Lawrence or maybe Justin Herbert, depending on which side of that game you're on, can come in and like, all right, we can fix this, right? Skylar Thompson at this point is not a guy who's going to come in and fix this. Burrow can, Huntley can't, right? You still have to let Thompson, like in today's game, to keep up with the Bills, you have to figure out a way to score some points. And Miami did that remarkably. At a place in Buffalo where they don't lose playoff games there. They've only lost one ever. So if you would watch Thompson against the Jets or Pats at the end of the regular season, you would have thought, wait, you're going to bank on this guy? But it's better, like when you don't have confidence in play calling with your quarterback, when you're not trying to figure out ways to design things to make his life a little bit easier, even if you don't think he's the greatest, like you've already lost the game if you're like, we have no chance with him, so let's have our play calling protect a guy for 60 minutes. You don't really win those games unless your defense is awesome. And against Buffalo at their place, despite liking some of the talent on the Dolphins roster defensively, that wasn't really going to happen, right? We could talk about Geno Smith and Pete Carroll. And maybe the most impressive of all of them is that, do you realize how great it was for Baltimore to have a designed offense around Lamar Jackson and go, okay, no one's Lamar, but with Tyler Huntley in here, as bad as it looked to start, like maybe we can do some things to combo it up, make them look differently. That short yardage conversion was an incredibly well-executed play where they ran out all these blockers sweeping in front of Huntley, where he had enough time and protection to make a decision and decide which hole that he wanted to go for. And yes, there are individual things we can all get to, but I'm just saying, like, there's so many coaches in this league now that find ways to have faith in a quarterback, even if they're limited talent-wise at that position. On the other side of it, you would say, well, when you have an Allen, when you have a Mahomes, you have some of these other guys, Burrow at times, just can fix everything. You don't have to worry about it as much. But these teams went in at a massive deficit talent-wise at that position and still found a way to battle. And it just speaks to how much coaching matters in this league more than any other one. You could argue coaching in college is different because it's perhaps even more important as far as who you are as a program and recruiting and all that kind of stuff. But as far as winning games, nothing's even close to the NFL. Forget baseball. Hockey, they fire everybody the entire time. As we know in basketball, if you don't have one of the main guys, you have no chance. Okay, this is a perfect transition to coaching not working out because we saved it for last. Let's talk about that Jags comeback. It's 27-0 Chargers in the first half. It's 27-7 at the half. I made the joke about the way scores work in the NFL again, that it's really only 3.9 to 1. But the problem here for Jacksonville, or maybe the hope was, they were -5 turnovers in this game. It reminded me a little of the Pats' 28-3 Atlanta Super Bowl, in that when you watch it, you're like, okay, this score is not good, but does it feel like they're getting dominated? Like when you're down 28-0 because you're screwing up the entire time, that's different than just another team lining up 4 straight possessions, going 70, 80 yards, and pushing you all over the field, and you never converting a third down because you can't get anybody open on 3rd and 7. So it felt a little different, and I think we just are way too dismissive, as if we've never seen any of these games before, where teams are like, look, 27-7, like, they can't score 3 times while also holding the other team to 0 points. And in this case, 3. But teams that were +5 in the turnover margin, 142-4-1. The 5th team to win that game, Jacksonville. So it's the biggest blown lead in franchise history. We knew that Mike Williams was out with a back fracture, which is just unspeakable that could happen last week. Carter's out of the game at receiver. So let's hammer in on a few plays here. I want to thank Daniel Popper of The Athletic, who did a really good job recapping some of the stuff. So Michael Brady on that jet sweep that didn't work out, he's a practice squad player this year. He's now getting the handoff in the spot on a kill to the jet sweep if Herbert didn't like the look to run it up the middle, which he didn't. Carter didn't know that there was a handoff on that play. A jet sweep that the Chargers have run 4 times this season for -21 yards. Okay, why don't the Chargers run the football more? They had 7 yards on 7 design runs in the second half. Now, Lawrence looked lost. It looked like he was confusing man and zone coverage in the first half. It's not all on him. I didn't think necessarily like every pick was on him, but, some of them were too, of course. But then the Jags go up-tempo, 12 no-huddle plays in the second half. It didn't feel like the Chargers adapted to that. Let's talk about Bosa's neutral zone to negate a sack there. That one's a little dicey. They drew a line on the broadcast during that game where I was like, what is this line? It looked like if I had a 2-year-old, I would imagine that would be the line they draw. But I don't have a 2-year-old or any of them, so I don't know what their lines look like. So that ends up leading to a touchdown. So it's 27-14. So Bosa, I'm bringing that up because he's already pre-mad about everything else. He took his pre-mad workout. Later on, he gets mad about a false start that's not called and then throws his helmet down, which actually was a big deal because it moved the 2-point conversion to a 1-yard line instead of the 2-yard line. And at that point, you just feel like you have many more options from the 1-yard line. Now, on the replay, I thought the official was right. And when we slow-mo these things sometimes, like a lot of stuff can look like false starts. Everything in slow motion looks like it's pass interference. So I don't know that Bosa, look, he's lined up across the guy, so he sees him move a little bit. But I'm telling you, it's not this perfectly precise thing on the snap of the football all the time. There's always like a little bit of movement in there. And so for Bosa to go that crazy and then give up the penalty in a spot that big of a deal in the conversion, I understand his frustration, but it seemed like a lot. You also have Staley not going for the touchdown on the missed field goal attempt, 30-20. That's with 8:47 left in the game. It was 4th and 2 at the Jacksonville 22. I do think field goals have become undervalued. When I hear it's the 1 possession, 2 possession argument, it's like, sometimes 6 or 7 is way better than 3 or 4, you guys. So why are you making this argument? Certainly when it's the 6 or 3 argument. But in this case, it would have been 13 instead of 10. That seems to go against the stuff that Staley would normally do in the past. Jacksonville goes 81 yards in 10 plays, kick the game-winning field goal. That's your ball game. The Chargers wore the black cleats in this one because Staley wanted them to honor the second three-peat Bulls. Can a wildcard team do that? There's a lot of chargering, which is now becoming a national branded thing. I would say to Chargers fans, there used to be a thing called Clemsoning. I never quite understood it. I remember Van Pelt did a feature on it. I think he got a little annoyed with me on the air where I was like, so what's Clemsoning? Have hopes, have a pretty good record, and then you lose late in the season? Huh. Do any other college football teams ever do that? You can have this angst that you feel is only about you and your fan base, which is kind of selfish, right? Like I said yesterday, Bills fans going up. This is what being a Bills fan is like. Cincinnati, tie. Like, oh, never have nice things, you know? Honestly, the Cleveland fan base prior to LeBron's championship in 2016, you guys were more than justified in having all the bad times. But even though the chargering thing is now a nationally recognized deal after that kind of historic loss this weekend, and real specific stuff that we can point to with the coaching. Again, Mike Williams being hurt is inexcusable. They're a completely different team with him in there. I can't believe that happened last week. All right? They win the game if he's playing this week. Also on this game, welcome to the doubt portal for Justin Herbert. Mike Sando points out that he's had only 6 Tier 1 quarterbacks in his quarterback tier column that were still on rookie deals. Herbert's the only one without a postseason win. Does that mean something? Are people going to start comparing him to Wentz because we're all wowed by the physical throws? Well, the Wentz thing would seem impossible, but it also seemed impossible for Wentz to become Wentz if you go back to 2017. I'm not even saying that now. It's just going to suck for you Chargers fans. It's just going to suck. And everybody seems to think that Staley's going to get fired, but it feels like people that understand the Chargers history, I'm like, that's not really how they work. Mike McCoy, 4 years, 27-37. Anthony Lynn, 4 years, 33-31, including that 45-0 loss to the Patriots, which I think is still one of the worst coach games I've ever seen in my life. And I don't really like saying that because I know these guys know way more about football than I do. I'm just not one of those guys. It's like, oh, this coach sucks. This coach sucks. Yeah, every coach sucks. I can't believe they called this, right? Staley's 19-15 in 2 years. They did make the playoffs. He had a really bad day. I don't know if he's going to be gone.